Moments ago, we were mentioning a bulletin was just handed to us in the identity of the suspect who was picked up at the Texas Theater earlier in the afternoon. A suspect who is reportedly, allegedly, to have shot and killed a Dallas policeman as he chased the suspected assassin of President Kennedy through a movie theater in the South Oak Cliff section. The officer was J.D. Tippit, 38, slain as he and fellow policeman M.N. McDonald ran into the rear exit of the Texas Theater. Tippit and McDonald received a tip the assassin of the president might have gone into the theater. An usher told them a man in a brown shirt had entered the darkened theater just moments before. According to police headquarters, Tippit fired a shot. McDonald rushed the suspect. The suspect said, "It's all over now." McDonald and the suspect sprawled over a seat in the theater. McDonald's face was slashed. Police said it was a 4-inch gash, and the suspect was seized. And the suspect now identified as chairman of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. His name, Lee H. Oswald. And he is, at the moment, the prime suspect in the assassination of the President of the United States. Governor John Connally of Texas was cut down in the same attack, has undergone an operation for a gunshot wound in the chest. And although doctors say Connally is not out of the woods yet, they say his vital signs are good. They say he has a good pulse. His respiration is satisfactory. Another report from the hospital says that the doctors have opened the chest of the governor in an operation and have found several broken ribs and a bruised lung. They say the lung was collapsed by the bullet, but has been reinflated. Doctors report no serious artery damage done to the governor's heart. He'll be in the operating room until around 4:30 p.m., which will be about 35 minutes from this present moment, and then will undergo surgery for a leg wound. The governor wounded twice. As he sat in the back seat of the president's car. Connally's pulse and blood pressure were reported all right at 2:30 p.m. And just moments ago, report that the governor, although still in serious condition, appears to be holding his own, which is gratifying to all citizens, not only of Texas, but of the United States. The president's mother and father learned of the tragedy from a workman at their home in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. Neither has commented. The president's father, Joseph P. Kennedy, is a semi-invalid as a result of a stroke several years ago. In Washington, President Kennedy's brother Edward, a U.S. senator, presiding over the Senate when word of the shooting reached him, he rushed from the chamber. The Senate recessed pending developments. The House was not in session.
You're listening to KBOX Continuing News.
This is Bill Hampton in the KBOX newsroom. Lyndon Baines Johnson is the 36th President of the United States. He took the oath of office officially at 2:39 p.m. Central Standard Time in Dallas this afternoon aboard the same airliner that Mr. Kennedy had flown to Dallas in this morning. Then he flew back to the Capitol, and the late President's body also on the same craft. He'd gone to the hospital immediately after Mr. Kennedy and Governor Connally were shot. After the chief executive's death, Johnson was hurried out of the building under heavy guard and was taken to Love Field. The plane parked in the same place where he had landed about an hour before. With the 55-year-old Johnson when he took the oath were his wife and Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy, the late president's widow. And of course the developments now, who did the shooting, how many men were killed exactly, officially, and who was the suspect, and what are the developments in the case at this point. Now we switch to Sam Pate, Kbox Mobile Unit.
Sam Pate from City Hall. The latest details from the press room here is that Captain Wilfrid considers the 24-year-old suspect in custody as a prime suspect. The reports from reliable sources here at City Hall say the suspect holding get 2 more. The suspect's wife is believed to be a Russian. It's unknown at this time if she is in police custody or not. At the time of the shooting, I was immediately ahead of the motorcade. I noticed the Secret Service men grabbed submachine guns, picked up speed, and run emergency code to Parkland Hospital. Monitoring the secret channel used by Dallas police, I heard Chief Curry tell all available officers to surround the building and see what happened and where and to whom. About that time, the motorcade whizzed past me, but I still couldn't tell if it was the president that had been shot. I immediately broke the news that someone had been shot and that they were being rushed emergency code to Parkland Hospital. But here at City Hall, still no official word that the suspect was the man that killed the president. We do know that he is the one that shot and killed Detective J.D. Tippit. The rifle used in the shooting was found by detectives. That rifle in the crime lab being fingerprinted at this time. Captain Pritz entered the hallway moments ago stating that he couldn't make any further comments at this time. From City Hall, this is Sam Pate for KBOX News.
Here is a bulletin just in. President Kennedy's body will lie in state at the White House tomorrow. This has just been announced by House Speaker John McCormick. McCormick says he thinks the body will be taken to the Capitol Sunday to remain in the Great Rotunda until about noon Monday. There's nothing definite yet on the exact arrangements of the president's funeral. This bulletin just in to us. President Kennedy's body to lie in state at the White House tomorrow. This has just been announced by the House Speaker, John McCormick. McCormick says he thinks the body will be taken to the Capitol Sunday to remain in the Great Rotunda until about noon on Monday. But as for the final arrangements on the funeral, there is nothing definite at the moment. President Johnson is the 8th man to succeed to the office on the death of a president, the 4th to be thrust into the post by an assassination. He was serving in the Senate of the United States as senior senator from Texas and Senate Majority Leader when the then Senator John Kennedy chose him as his running mate in the 1960 election. Mr. Johnson, credited with carrying some of the southern states for the ticket in the paper-thin Democratic victory of that year. He was sworn in as vice president on January 20th, 1961. 2 years, 10 months, 2 days later, Lyndon Johnson is president of the United States. A Yale official in New Haven, Connecticut, says it's undecided at this point whether the Yale-Harvard football game will be played tomorrow. The late president, John F. Kennedy, once played football for the Harvard team. The 46-year-old Kennedy, the 36th and youngest president, lived about 1/2 hour after being shot in the head as his limousine left downtown Dallas. Kennedy dies at the Dallas hospital where he'd been taken in a frantic but futile effort to save his life. He lived long enough to receive the last rites of the Roman Catholic Church. Mr. Kennedy was the first Roman Catholic president in the history of the United States. It was the first death of a president in office since Franklin D. Roosevelt succumbed to a cerebral hemorrhage in Georgia in 1945. Kennedy as the first president to be assassinated since William McKinley was shot in 1901. It's believed that Kennedy's body will be moved shortly to Washington. Funeral services for presidents who die in office usually are held in the capital city. There have been reports amid the confusion created by the assassination that Vice President Johnson had also been wounded, but these reports turned out to be false. The new president and his wife spent about 1/2 hour at the hospital where Kennedy died, and then they left. There was no opportunity to question. Also denied was a report that Johnson had suffered a mild heart attack. The prime suspect in the case at the moment has been a man by the name of Lee H. Oswald, 24 years old. He has been accused of the slaying of a Dallas policeman shortly after the shooting of the president. Police Captain Pat Ganaway says the suspect was an employee in the building where the rifle was found. Ganaway says the suspect had visited Russia and was married to a Russian, but these reports are not immediately confirmed.
I have a report from Ron Jenkins.
And now we take you to the Parkland Hospital, where KBOX reporter Ron Jenkins is standing by for the latest report on the condition of Governor John Connally.
Ron Jenkins, KBOX News. We're at Parkland Hospital, the temporary press room. Dr. Robert Shaw of the Southwest Medical School has just finished surgery on Governor John Connally and has come forth with the word that all Texas and all of the United States is waiting for. Dr. Shaw said the governor's condition is listed as quite satisfactory. He said the governor went into the operating room in good condition, and he came out in good condition as well. He said the governor was fully conscious during the operation, had no reactions other than the ordinary human reactions to an operation. He quoted the governor as saying at one point, "It hurt." Fragments of a bullet were found. The doctor said that the main cause of the wound and the main cause of injuries, the bullet wound itself, was a fairly clean wound. However, the bullet entered the governor's right shoulder, just lateral to the shoulder blade, and he said it took part of the 5th rib of the governor and shattered it, thereby causing what he called secondary missiles. However, once again, the word that everyone's been waiting for following surgery, Governor John Connally, who had one bullet wound from this morning's incident, is in quite satisfactory condition following surgery here at Parkland Hospital. Further details as they come up, Ron Jenkins, KBOX News.
Assassination of the president by a Dallas newspaper photographer who was riding in a car close behind the presidential car on Friday. There were 5 of us in the car. When we heard the first shot, the president had already turned the corner. We'd not made the corner yet, and then we heard 2 more shots. As far as I know, 3 shots were all I heard. I just instinctively looked that way. First, somebody joked about it, saying it was firecrackers. Then, since I was facing the building where the shots were coming from, I glanced up, saw 2 colored men in a window straining to look at a window above them. And as I looked up to the window above, I saw a rifle being pulled back in the window. It might have been resting on the windowsill. I didn't see a man. I didn't even see if it had a scope on it. The building the man was referring to was the 2nd floor down from the top of the building, and it was the inn window facing Elm Street, the corner window. The president's car was about halfway between Houston Street and the underpass, and we were beginning to turn the corner. He, that referring to the gunman, had about a 45-degree angle from the building to the president's car. I looked to my left. I could see both cars speeding off. The president's car and the car behind him carrying the vice president. They disappeared under the underpass. And then I could see a colored family covering up their child in the grass. A policeman was down on his knee. I couldn't tell if he were hit. I thought the child was dead or something. And then the Negro parents picked up the boy, and they ran. As soon as I saw the rifle, I knew someone was trying to kill them, but it never entered my mind that he could be dead. I just couldn't believe it at first. It's going to give Dallas a bad name, I think. The general reaction of all the guys around me was they just couldn't believe a thing like that could happen here. That was an eyewitness report from a news photographer for a Dallas newspaper who was riding in a car close behind the presidential car as it progressed through Dallas this afternoon. The president walked bareheaded and without a coat through a misty rain into the parking lot across the street from Fort Worth Hotel, Texas at 8:45 this morning, the beginning of what was to be a fateful trip for the president. He spoke there to a cheering throng of Democrats who could not get tickets to see him at a breakfast appearance, apologized because Mrs. Kennedy was not with him, that she was organizing herself, and it takes a little longer. At 9 o'clock, the president and Mrs. Kennedy attended the breakfast in the Hotel Texas, sponsored by the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce. Mrs. Kennedy walked in some minutes late. Her entrance brought tremendous applause from the 2,500 guests who were gathered there. Both were presented Texas boots, and the president got a Texas hat. He declined to put it on in public, joking that he would wear it at the White House next Monday. At 10:35, the president and Mrs. Kennedy left the Texas Hotel by auto for Carswell Air Force Base near Fort Worth, their short flight to Dallas. At 11:37, the president's plane landed at Dallas's Love Field. Mrs. Kennedy emerged from the plane smiling, shaking hands with airport greeters, and she carried a bouquet of red roses. Young men in the crowd shouted, "Hey, Jackie," and squeezed forward for a closer look of the attractive First Lady. Several young girls screaming over Kennedy as he made his way through the crowd. There was no sign of anti-Kennedy sentiment. They left the motorcade that was to take them over an 11-mile route, including downtown Dallas. And then the clock moved up to 12:30 p.m. The motorcade approached a triple underpass which feeds into Stemmons Expressway, the 5-lane route to the Dallas Trade Mart where Kennedy was to make the luncheon speech. And suddenly, the silence shattered by a series of rifle shots. The president fell face down on the back seat of his car, a bullet in his head. Governor John Connally slumped at his side, wounded in the back. Mrs. Kennedy grasped her husband's head, and she gasped, "Oh, no." And then the motorcade raced to Parkland Hospital near the Trade Mart, and the president was taken to the emergency ward where he received a blood transfusion and then the final rites from a Catholic priest. At 1 p.m., the trip was over. The president had died.
Now to Carl King in Action Central for a live report from Action Central's Sam Pate.
Sam Pate is standing by to make a direct report. Come in, Sam.
Secret Service man and policeman J.D. Tippit. And is being questioned by Captain Wilfritz, the Dallas Homicide Department, Secret Service men, and the FBI. As the suspect was literally dragged down the hallway here at City Hall, he fought, kicked, and cursed police officers and a few newsmen. He killed police officer J.D. Tippit with a .38 caliber snub-nose revolver. The rifle found at the Texas School Book Supply, commonly called the Sexton Building, believed to be a .30-06 caliber. Still no official word from Captain Fritz that this suspect is the man that shot the president. As the man was brought into City Hall, hundreds of people turning around outside the building cursed the man, shouting, "Kill him, shoot the dirty SOB, shoot him." The man told officers that, "I got me a president and a cop, now I need to get 2 more. The hallway here at the entrance of the Homicide Department filled with newsmen awaiting the word from Captain Wilfritz that will either make or break this story suspect-wise. Speculation is that 3 more men were involved in the shooting. Police checking that story out at this time. The man with a clenched fist said that he is a pro-Castro, that he has lived in Russia. He was just now escorted just moments ago from Captain Wilfrid's office by a cordon of police officers to an unknown building here in City Hall. Captain Wilfrid made the statement just seconds ago that now the man says that he doesn't admit anything, but he is a prime suspect. Captain Wilfrid says the man is still a prime suspect. From City Hall, this is Sam Pate for KBOX News.
Shock and horror were the unanimous reactions as Texans heard of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy and the wounding of Governor John Connally. It's the darkest day in the history of the great state of Texas, said Lieutenant Governor Preston Smith. It's a sad tragedy leaving millions of Texans and other people in the country and the world sad and shocked that something like this could happen in Texas or America. I thought we were through with things like this when Lincoln died, sobbed Jim Dobbs, Republican candidate for Congress in Austin and former narrator for a conservative nationwide radio program. It's the most horrible thing that has ever happened. It is impossible to comprehend that this assassination of the president and attempted assassination of our governor could occur in the midst of what had been the warmest and friendliest reception that any president had received in Texas within my memory, said former Governor Price Daniel, who had served in the U.S. Senate with President Kennedy. The Lieutenant Governor and Speaker Byron Tunnell asked late today that all Texas churches of all faiths conduct a memorial service tonight for the late president and a prayer service for the recovery of the governor. The heads of the two houses of the legislature asked all members of the legislature in Austin to gather in the House of Representatives at 8 o'clock tonight for services conducted by chaplains of the House and the Senate. I am deeply shocked and distressed, as I know all Republicans are, by the tragic death. This said by Republican National Committeeman Albert D. Fay. I am in deep shock. I'm sure the sympathy of the world is with us now, said U.S. Representative Joe Kilgore of McAllen. The assassination of President Kennedy has stunned all of us, said Republican State Vice Chairman Mrs. G.N. McDaniel of Borger. Lyndon Baines Johnson is the 36th President of the United States now. He took the oath of office at 2:39 this afternoon, Dallas time, aboard the same airliner that Mr. Kennedy had flown to Dallas in this morning. Then he flew back to the Capitol. The late president's body is on that plane. He had gone to the hospital immediately after Mr. Kennedy and Governor Connally were shot. After the president's death, Johnson was hurried out of the building under heavy guard, taken to Dallas's Love Field. The plane was parked in the same place it had landed in this morning. With the 55-year-old Johnson, when he took the oath, were his wife and Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy, the late president's widow. Dallas Police Department today arrested a 24-year-old man, Lee H. Oswald, as you have just heard, in connection with the slaying of a Dallas policeman shortly after the president was assassinated. He's also being strongly interrogated to see if he had any connection with the slaying of the president. The man, Oswald, pulled screaming and yelling from the Texas Theater in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas. He brandished a pistol, which officers took away from him after the scuffle. Police officer M.N. McDonald, who was cut across the face in the scuffle, quoted Oswald as saying, after he was subdued, "Well, it's all over. I got me a president and a cop. I'll get two more." A large crowd had congregated around the theater witnessing the arrest. Police was told to hold the crowds back because many apparently connected the arrested man with the slaying of the president. The slain officer was J.D. Tippit. Ron Jenkins, KBOX and Mobile News reporter, has further information.
Hello.
Stand by.
President is dead. Throughout the afternoon, brief reports coming into an emergency press room here as to what happened, how different people involved described the tragedy, how they reacted, and a condition report on Governor John Connally of Texas, which you heard moments ago on KBOX. The president is dead, and every doctor, nurse, patient, and newsman here shows the shock and the strain of this, the greatest tragedy of this or perhaps any century, save the crucifixion of Christ. In spite of the obvious deep grief felt by every person here, though, and across the nation as well, there's still ample room for great concern as to the condition of Governor John Connally of Texas. The latest report by the governor's attending physician, Dr. Robert Shaw. Following surgery, he said the governor's condition is quite satisfactory. He came out of the operation in very good shape, and they are quite optimistic toward the governor's fast, full recovery. Dr. Shaw said the governor would probably remain here for 10 to 14 days. Everyone fervently hoping and praying today that this day marked by such a tragedy already would not be further darkened, and now hope has brightened considerably. A Secret Service man relating the story to newsmen here this afternoon said Mrs. Connally was probably the only person who could relate the most complete facts as to just what happened. Mrs. Connally said the president, during the parade, was sitting in the right rear seat of the limousine, Mrs. Kennedy the left rear seat. Governor Connally was sitting in a jump seat directly in front of President Kennedy, and Mrs. Connally was sitting in another similar jump seat in the left-hand side of the car. Mrs. Connally said it appeared that the president was hit by the first bullet. They said they were ready to go under the triple underpass on Elm Street. She said in the first shot, the governor half turned toward KBOX newsman said, "Look, there's Jack Ruby. I wonder what he's doing here." It's not known what he was doing here. He seems to know many of the people here in the police department, Bill. He has been here almost constantly. Why, we don't know. Perhaps this was the reason. Are there any
one question, Rob. We received unofficial, I repeat that, unofficial comments that Ruby had made a full confession and had given an elaborate explanation to the detectives as to why he shot Lee Oswald, something to the effect, I repeat, this is unofficial, that he didn't want Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy to suffer anymore. Have you heard anything at all along this line?
I have heard nothing on it, Bill. I will investigate further on my own here. So
all right, let me repeat that what I just said was an unofficial comment we received. All right, Ron Jenkins at City Hall, thank you very much. We know we'll be hearing from you momentarily. We now switch over to newsman Phil Allen.
Exciting events taking place as the tragedy unfolds before the world on the shooting of President Kennedy only Friday, just short now 49 and a half hours ago. At the present time, Jack Ruby is being held at City Hall. You just heard a report from KBOX reporter Ron Jenkins, in which all photographers and reporters at City Hall are going to be searched by police for concealment of any other weapons or any weapons at all.
This is Bill Hampton in the KBOX newsroom. We go immediately to Dick Moore at Parkland Hospital. Go ahead.
Well, Lee Oswald is dead. Dr. Tom Shires made the announcement in the press conference just moments ago that he died at about 1:06. And you'll pardon us if we're out of breath. Ran from the emergency room to our unit here. Again, though, he died from a bullet wound in his side. The first indication we got of the extreme severity of the wound was about 45 minutes ago when we were told that the chest cavity had been cut open and that open heart surgery was taking place. Then he was put on the pacemaker to keep his heart beating through electronic impulses. That also failed. Again, Lee Oswald, 24 years old, accused assassin of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, died at 1:06 at Parkland Hospital. Dick Moore, KBOX Mobile News.
The ironic event of the century undoubtedly today in the city of Dallas, Texas. An accused assassin who allegedly shot and killed the 35th President of the United States while he was riding downtown in a motorcade in Dallas yesterday has himself been shot and killed less than 24 hours later. Lee Oswald died at Parkland Hospital just 10 feet away from where President John F. Kennedy died yesterday at Parkland Hospital. Oswald died at officially 1:26 Central Standard Time in the emergency room here in Dallas this afternoon. How can one describe these turn of events? One crazed man, one demented mind, one so-called despicable person kills a president. Less than 24 hours later, he himself is shot and killed. For further late developments on this ironic turn of events, we now switch to Jerry Kunkel at City Hall. Go ahead, Jerry.
To hold the crowds back here, to try to get the information out, very cooperative with the press. They know the people. They know the people want the information. They know that the press is the only means by which they can get the information out, and they're doing everything they can to cooperate. The Dallas Police Department, I think, has been highly underrated through the whole thing. They should get credit, laurels of all sorts. They have done a remarkable job. They continue to do so as quickly as the information is able for release. Why, of course, they have been getting it to us. We'll have it. We'll be bringing it to you.
We also heard reported from Dick Moore at Parkland Hospital that the surgeon said the bullet appeared to be a .38 caliber. This is, the doctor reiterated that he was no expert on bullets, but to him the bullet did appear to be a .38. It was the bullet which he removed from the stomach of Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald, incidentally, as a side note, did not make any comment after he was shot.
Right, this is Bill Hampton back in the Kbox newsroom. The black-haired accused assassin of the president had walked out of City Hall a few hours ago and to his death, handcuffed with a tiny smile on his lips. However, according to some eyewitnesses, he may have spotted his killer just an instant before he was shot. One eyewitness puts it this way: "I'm sure he saw the man. It's my feeling he knew the gun was going to fire because he jerked his hands toward his stomach in sort of a reflex action even before I heard the shot." One of the 4 surgeons who worked on Oswald at Parkland Hospital, Dr. Malcolm Perry, the physician who tried to save the president just 48 hours ago. He said the bullet punctured Oswald's spleen, pancreas, right kidney, and liver, and lodged just under the skin on the right side near the back. Police Chief Curry had arranged a public transfer of Lee Oswald from one jail to another in response to pleas of newsmen covering the case. He said after the slaying, "If I hadn't promised you people I would not take Oswald until this morning, we would have taken him during the night. But I told you what I did, and I wouldn't back down on my pledge." Hospital Administrator C.J. Price at Parkland said attendants on duty had been warned of the possibility of just such an attempt on Lee Oswald's life in Dallas today. And thus, they were on hand when the alert came from City Hall after the shooting at the City Hall basement.
However, Oswald was double handcuffed, and it was just impossible to do at the time. It was too much of a crowd. Ruby ran up, shoved the pistol into his side, pulled the trigger, and that, of course, was the end of the assassin. So that's the way it looks here at City Hall at this hour.
That was Ron Jfk'S from City Hall with the latest report from that vicinity, describing to us what is going on there. We are keeping up-to-the-minute reports coming from City Hall and Parkland Hospital. The last reports we had from Parkland Hospital was from Dick Moore, in which he stated the feelings of the people gathered at Parkland were mixed. Their comments were mixed. We are looking for some of those comments at the moment, which we wrote down at the time Dick was telling us over the air. They said they seemed to feel cheated, as we mentioned a moment ago. Drawn into the background has been the actual transfer of the president's body to the Capitol Rotunda. Ordinarily, this would be of the utmost importance to citizens, but with the new events reaching, the new violence reaching into the news, it has been pushed into the background. A caisson drawn by the 7 matched gray horses moved along Washington's Pennsylvania Avenue today, carrying President Kennedy's body to the Capitol building for the last time.